A couple months ago, I received a thank you letter from an NVC trainer who just got certified that I supported and mentored to a small degree, thanking him for a conversation we had even months before. And as a result of that conversation, he decided to become an Agile coach because he saw the blend of the communications framework called nonviolent communication, empowering him to be even more effective in his technical work, and specifically in a capacity with Agile. So I'm curious about you, and I'm hoping to give you some tools and exercises that you can use in your work, and at the same time, learn more about the specific challenges that you face. And I understand there's a diversity of organizations here tonight with a diversity of different kinds of changes. Some of you are growing, some of you are shrinking, and I'm guessing all of you are changing to some degree. It's a dynamic field, as I understand. So just the kind of people I love to work with. So, ready to jump in? Okay, so what we're going to cover tonight are just a few things, since we do have a limited time. We're going to start off by learning a little bit more about the specific challenges that you face, get some examples from you so we can really address and focus on what matters most to you in this room. We're going to talk a little bit about nonviolent communication, which is a communications framework that fuels most of the leadership development and organizational development work that I do. It's the secret sauce that has provided the most breakthrough results in almost 20 years of organizational effectiveness consulting. So I'm really excited to share that with you. I'm excited that Amanda saw the value for her work as an organizational change agent, and hope to pique your curiosity and desire to learn even more about it, because it's like a martial art. You know, today you might learn a few punches and kicks, but if you take it deep enough, it becomes a way of life. It becomes, for some, a philosophy, even a spirituality. It's really, how do we live and breathe a compassionate, empathetic life? And believe it or not, there's business value to that. It can actually increase our business results. So I'm hoping you'll get a little taste of that today. The next thing we're going to cover are the interactive pieces. Today's goal is not only to take you through some exercises, but to give you some exercises that you can actually facilitate with the teams that you coach and the teams that you work with. So this is really about the takeaways. And then to conclude, I'm hoping that we'll learn from you. After the exercises that you experience will be my best shot at giving you something that's relevant and meaningful to you. From there, I want to hear back from you, get some feedback on what you experience and how that might apply even more specifically, in an even more targeted way, to some of the scenarios that you face as Agile enthusiasts. For example, Amanda was telling me about, what do you call it, pairings?
Mm-hmm. Pair programming.
I'm sorry?
Pair programming.
Paired programming. How many of you have experience with that in your work? Okay, so that's, for example, one of the sample scenarios that I'm hoping some of these exercises might be relevant for you. So that's our program, and let's begin by learning some of your challenges. Take a moment and think about how you respond to the following two questions. Just silently reflect. What are some of the factors that discourage transparency in your team, in your teams? What gets in the way of transparency? And the second question is, what are some of the root causes of resistance in your Agile teams? So what gets in the way of transparency in your experience? I don't want textbook stuff or general stuff. I want to know, what's your experience? What have you seen? What have you come up against? And what are the root causes of resistance that you have personally experienced and been challenged with? So take a moment and think about that. And what I'd like to invite you to do is, in your tables, just to go around and share your response to question number 1 in 1 sentence or less. That's your challenge, folks. Efficiency. 1 sentence or less, your response to question number 1, and then go around a second time, your response to question number 2. Okay? Ready, set, go. Okay, let's hear a response from each table. Okay, starting with the back table. Can you give us one thing that stood out for you that discourages transparency in the teams you face?
We weren't quite there, but finished. But it's okay. But main thing was discouraging transparency was fear, in the sense of fear of being able to get the job done, I guess, right? Or fear of maybe being blamed if the decision where it didn't go well.
Yeah.
And then there were if you are not part of a clique within your company.
So fear of blame, fear of failure, fear of exclusion, or lack of inclusion. Cool.
And
Okay.
the other thing, well, it's kind of funny in the sense that, and no offense, but like I told a couple of people I was coming tonight, and they're like, non-violent community. You're not violent, Nels. I mean, so part of it's lingo with Agile, I think, in a way, right?
Absolutely.
People don't quite get what it means until they live it for a while, right?
Actually, there's a lot of trainers in the nonviolent communication community that call it compassionate communication because there's so much confusion around the term nonviolence. It's like, because actually, I have worked with organizations that have dealt with,
Violent situations.
actual violence, and so there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
Around
Well, they were
that.
telling me I'm the opposite of that, so why would I?
You're like the Gandhi of the group. All right, thank you. Okay, and our next week, give us an example.
We were focused more on the root level.
Okay, would you like to pass?
Well, do you want an example or root level or?
We'll come back to you for the root. We're going to focus on question 1 right now. Yep, last call.
We also came up with fear of whatever the thing is, but we thought fear was
Right on.
discouraging.
Raise your hand if the fears that we mentioned are also relevant to you and your work. Yeah, and that is human nature.
One example that came up too was trust of it not being a two-way street. Trust that I'm telling you what to do, and I'm not open to the input that you're going to give me. And that closes off transparency.
So are you saying that as a facilitator, I can give feedback but not receive it, or vice versa?
Yeah, give feedback, and if people are perceiving that you're commanding them to do things rather than listening to their point of view and collaborating with them, they don't want to be open with you.
Yeah, so they want more mutuality and choice, would you say? Yeah, raise your hand if that's something you face. Okay, so these are some strong themes. Thank you. Let's hear from this table. What's one thing that gets in the way of transparency?
I like Brad's comment.
What was that?
Just that people didn't need to not be transparent, just didn't occur to them to verbalize what was going on.
That they're normally not the kind of person that it's just not part of their normal communications.
Or something they're taking for granted because they are perceived to become knowledge, and if they're not for one person, then
I mean, they presume that everyone else gets it. They don't have to articulate it. Thank you. Raise your hand if that applies to you too, to the groups that you work with. Okay, great. Can we hear from this table? One thing that gets, of course, I wait until everyone takes a bite of pizza before I ask you a question. So. What gets in the way of transparency?
I think we were just going along with the fear thing as well.
Yeah, that's a big one for you.
What everyone else is saying, but fear of failure in front of everyone else.
I love it when I mentioned that, I ask you a question before you take a bite of pizza, because then I saw that whole table take a bite of pizza right away, because they know I'm calling on them next. So, okay, thank you, David. Okay.
A little bit different than other fears is fear of conflict.
Fear of conflict. Yep, how many of you deal with conflict avoidance in your cultures, organizational culture? Don't rock the boat, right? And I remember when I was in Japan a few years ago, a friend of mine who works for a chemical company in Japan was saying there's an expression in Japanese in the workplace that the nail, do you remember? The nail that sticks up gets hammered back down. No one wants to be the nail that sticks up. No one wants to be the little kid that says the emperor has no clothes, right? That little kid will get kicked out of town. Now, a lot of my work in doing the communications aspect of my work is how do you not become that little boy who says the emperor has no clothes and everyone wants to throw eggs at you? But how can you actually deliver the message, the emperor has no clothes, with such skill and such care that the emperor personally writes you a thank you note? That's what we want, right? That's a lot of my mission. So let's hear from the last group. What gets in the way of transparency?
Most of them, fear, things like that. The one that wasn't mentioned, I think, was just a lack of understanding.
Lack of understanding about
the other people in the organization. So especially when you don't understand somebody else and they ask you for something, you may say no. Well, you don't need that.
Yeah, because they don't really get where you're coming from, what you need, what you're about, what matters to you. Right. That's particularly a liability as organizations grow. As we grow, we have more structure by necessity. And departments can become more isolated and insulated from each other. And you've heard of organizational silos. A lot of the collaboration work that I do with organizations, the large organizations, is about dissolving the silos. So raise your hand if that's an issue that you face in your organization, is groups may not understand each other very well, and so things get missed in the translation. Okay. We're going to be working on some of those skills tonight. Any last comments or questions on transparency here? Okay, let's do one more round for each table, and we'll give you guys a break. As we go on, you want to do something unique, right? So if the other table said your thing, you have to remember what else did we say. So we'll start at this end, so you guys get to dig at the bottom of the barrel for the next question. So what's one root cause that you face that creates resistance to change?
Stale behavior.
Stale behavior. Stale in what way?
Oh, it's just old. It's
old, same old, same old.
Get rid of it.
Tradition, we always done it this way.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Siloed.
Thank you. Next table.
We said that if you're used to doing something one way and someone actually tells you or proposes something that's different, you just are resisting it because it's new and because they said to do it that way. You don't want to.
Okay, so would you say there's a little rebellion? If it was my own idea for change, maybe I'll embrace it, but if someone else tells me this is what I should be doing differently, a little pushback. Maybe I may not be so grateful. Yeah, how many of you love unsolicited advice? And yet most unsolicited advice is usually coming from a place of care. So how do we close that gap? Right? So great example, thank you. Let's hear from this table.
Being too busy to take a chance.
Too busy to take a chance. That is so true. How many of you deal with, actually I forgot. We didn't do a show of hands for you. So let's start with this. How many of you raise your hand if busyness gets in the way of effective teamwork? That is so big. And I'm a personal example of that. I do not like to run late for meetings, not only because of my own peace of mind and showing up, I want to show up all zen with you, right? I don't want to be all stressed out. But I also, for the environment, I know if I'm running late, I drive differently. And I waste gas. And it's like, I can't believe I'm stepping on the gas right now. Oh, I hate this. And yet, when I'm too busy and I fill everything up, I don't take the time to do things like be conservative with the environment, write the thank you notes and express gratitude, all the things that are important to me. If I get too busy, we clip the things that might not be urgent but are important. So that's I really appreciate that example. And tell me your example one more time. Was it
resistance when someone tells you to do something?
That's right. Resistance when someone else tells you what you should be doing. Raise your hand if that's part of your world. You see resistance in that way. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the, actually I don't think it was the NBC conference that you attended, it was the one the year before. One of the more popular sessions that I facilitated was on the dynamics of submission and rebellion in organizations and how people give their power away. So there's a lot of juiciness around the power dynamics that I'm sure you probably all face, especially if you're facilitators, because that naturally puts you in a place of power, even if you try to be up here. So let's hear from the last table in the back.
We didn't really talk about it.
Back in time.
I think that's a very, you're walking the talk.
I thought about perpetration here.
Perpetration.
So, like, if there's like a perpetration that's not discussed in the group, so someone has something against someone else because they didn't finish their job, or they weren't on time, or it wasn't QA'd right, or you know.
Are you talking about like maybe hidden resentments or
Yeah,
conflict that hasn't surfaced?
And if it's not brought out to the surface and discussed openly and apologized for or accepted as well at the same time, which is what I try to do, like be like, okay, let's just, you know, do better next time.
Yeah.
It's going to be, it becomes a perpetration where it becomes like, you know, go against each other.
Yeah,
Same
so
with
so long.
our work right now, where it's where a totally different group is not fulfilling their promise, and then it comes to ours and they're doing their work really well, but it's hindering them and they're being made the cause of the problem.
Yeah. So you are getting in the way of my success, whether you're an individual or a group,
Right.
and that perpetuates that resentment or the conflict.
So,
How many of you deal with that in your organizations? Does that get in the way? You know, it's interesting. I'm curious. In the software industry, I know you tend to be a faster moving, more turnover, dynamic industry. I've done a lot of work with opposite industries, a lot of work with different utilities, where, you know, not only do you have employees who've been there for 15 years, but you have generations of fathers and sons and daughters who've worked for the same company. And it's interesting. I've done some experiments. You know, raise your hand if you've had resentments, you know, like organizational resentments that lasted more than 5 years, more than 7 years, more than 10 years, you know, and you still see hands going up. People remember 10 years ago, you had a sexual harassment complaint about you. And I'm warning every young intern in the room to be aware of you. You know, that was maybe years ago, and maybe it was not even supported. Maybe it was not accurate. Who knows? And if it was, maybe you're different 10 years later. It's amazing how people hang on to stuff. So, okay, thank you for that information. That helps me get a better orientation of some of the challenges that you face. So let's talk a little bit about nonviolent communication and how this might actually relate to some of these challenges. We're going to start with just some generalities, just kind of a quick intro to NVC, and then actually get into some NVC-based exercises. So Amanda made an interesting note as we were preparing for this, which is the timing is actually very special for this. Between your last Agile meetup and today, the founder of NVC, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, died. And there's been a global grieving. I mean, the global trainer community, like, we're supposed to hold a phone call just as a memorial for like so many hours. There was so much interest, it actually went on for days. So for a lot of people, this changed the world. And just so you know, NVC is actually bigger outside the US than it is in the US. I'm hoping to change that. Just a quick note on Marshall. Some years ago, maybe 6 or so years ago, 2011? No, less than 6. Anyway, I actually studied for 10 days directly with Marshall. And it was interesting. So when I flew to Mexico and did this intensive training with the founder of NVC, I was surrounded by people from all over the world. You know, a fellow who had a software company in New Zealand, a human resources director from Germany, an entrepreneur from Turkey. I mean, it was so interesting. And at one point, someone just named the elephant in the room and just said, hey, let's admit it. Raise your hand if you are here because you want to study with Marshall before he passes away. Almost everyone raised their hand. So he's been doing it for a long time, and I'm grateful to have received that training before he passed. And so carrying the legacy forward, there are many trainers. I'm one of hundreds that continue to teach this. And one of the growing edges of NVC is understanding its effectiveness in organizations, how empathy actually does have a business value. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Some of the basics on nonviolent communication is there's 4 key elements. One is the art of observation. Just the facts. Just the facts. So something like, instead of saying, God, you are the smartest engineer in the world, you know, that's a judgment, right? How can I change that into an observation? It's like, wow, I really appreciated how fast you solved that problem. You know, sooner than I expected. You know, or you were able to find a solution that I wasn't able to find. Bravo. You know, so how do you translate judgments into facts? Not only the negative judgments, that person dominates the conversation, this person, you know, is out of touch with reality, you know, whatever the judgment is, how do you translate that actually into an observation? And that's what opens up real communication and teamwork, because that's when we free ourselves from blame. Feelings. How many of you have ever studied emotional intelligence? That's,
I was going to say, this
yeah.
is similar to me.
Yeah, the feelings, what I love about NVC is it takes emotional intelligence one step further. We're going to talk about that. So feelings are very much an aspect of emotional intelligence, being self-aware and aware of others. And if you notice emotions in yourself, or if you notice emotions or energy in others, how do you read that with curiosity? Ah, that's information. What is that telling me? It's telling me that there's something important to me. If you see me light up about something, what is that telling you? That probably I'm really excited or passionate or interested. If you see me, how many of you have ever facilitated groups and you see people checking out, disengaging? What does that tell you?
They're not glued into the conversation.
Yeah, you've lost a connection. There's something that they're not relating to. You know, or maybe they're protecting themselves by checking out. So learning how to notice feelings in yourself and others and use that as information is part of the art of NVC. So here's where NVC goes further than emotional intelligence. And that's this idea of needs. There's on your tables are a list of, it's not a comprehensive list, it's a partial list, but of common needs that every human being, no matter who you are, no matter where you live, can enjoy. Things like respect, like appreciation, like integrity, like care. We all have basic human needs. There's also a list of feelings, too. So the last part of NVC, and we'll talk more about needs in the next slide. The last part of NVC is the art of making requests. And this is probably one of the higher demand things that I get asked to speak about is, how do you actually make requests? How do you ask for what you want in ways that is going to increase your likelihood of getting it? And there is an art to the ask. That might be why I work with nonprofits so much. So there's a graphic that I've developed that helps explain what I consider the most unique aspect of NVC. And it's around being conscious of needs at all times. If you remember anything from today about NVC, it's going to be about the power of needs. So let's talk about this in a graphic model. So here is my 4th grader rendition of a glacier. You remember a glacier, or an iceberg, sorry, an iceberg, not a glacier. The tip of the iceberg is what you see, but yet it's the smallest part, right? What's under the water is the greater mass of the iceberg. That's the part that sinks the Titanic. So, strategies in NVC terminology is the things that we do to fulfill our needs. So let's say I have an itch. I might have a need for relief, right? What is my strategy? To scratch. I might have a need for love. What is the strategy for meeting that need? Sign up for OkCupid, yeah. Find a partner, right? I have a need for financial security in my life. What's the strategy for getting that? How do we get money, folks? Get a job, na 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 na. So So I invite you to think about everything we do, everything I say, everything you say, even every thought, every even step I take is meeting a need. I might be stepping in this direction so I can connect with both sides of the room, or to keep myself awake, whatever it is. I challenge you, after you leave, look at the world through the eyes of needs. Every action you see in others, in yourself, what is the underlying universal human need that I am trying to meet by doing this? When I get mad, that usually means there's an unmet need. And this is my maybe tragic attempt at meeting that need. So a subject that came up in our earlier questions was conflict, fear of conflict. Most conflict, actually I would say all conflict in my experience, comes up at the level of strategies. So strategies we talked about are the things that we do to meet needs, whether that's getting this job or that, finding this partner or that, scratching this itch, walking this direction. Those are, in NVC terminology, are what we call strategies. They're the actions we take, the choices we make to meet the needs. That's what happens at the level of conflict. So how do we diffuse the conflict? We first connect at the level of needs. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say that I have a deep need for respect. Take a moment and see my humanity. Appreciate how precious respect might be to me. Maybe I grew up as a child that I was always told to be seen and not heard. Right? Maybe I felt invisible. Can you, whatever background I have, can you appreciate that now for me as an adult? Respect is so precious. Can you feel some empathy for me? Can you maybe even appreciate why that's such a big deal for me? If I don't get respect in this job, in this marriage, that's a deal breaker. Okay, enjoy that connection. That's an example of a universal need. My story might not be the same as your story with regard to respect, but every single one of you here, I believe, can connect with how precious that need is. This is the connection that unites us as humans. So we're below the water level, at the level of needs. This is the space that I invite you to enter tonight as we do these exercises. This is the space of NVC. Now the art of NVC is how do we translate that as we surface to the level of strategy. You want to see how we can create conflict so easily? Remember this beautiful connection we have over my need for respect? What if I told you that my strategy for getting respect is that I carry a gun? How connected do you feel to me now? Do you see how that can invite conflict? Let's use a workplace example. Let's say at work I have a need for respect. And I'll give you a true life example with one of my long-term clients. High need for respect. And my strategy for feeling respected is, don't ever surprise me. I never want to hear from my boss something that's going on with you before you tell me. How might that create conflict? How do you think this person's team felt? Never surprise me. I want to know what's going on at all times. Yep. That team. So not only was I an executive coach to that vice president, I was also an executive coach to all of that person's direct reports. And you can imagine, what did they talk about in our coaching sessions? Micromanaging. Why did you hire me with all my talent if you can't trust me to make decisions without consulting you for everything? So it's big, I want autonomy, I need trust. Those are all on your list of universal needs. Autonomy, trust, choice, freedom, those show up really big in the workplace. So, what's the lesson here? Conflict occurs at the level of strategies. And the way to diffuse the conflict, minimize the conflict, or hopefully prevent it even before it happens, is to first connect at the level of needs. If we can figure out what's important to me, so for me it's respect is why I carry a gun. I don't, by the way, I'm so anti, they scare me. Although as a little child, I did enjoy shooting guns with my uncles in the desert. If you understand that my need is for respect, then instead of running away when I tell you that I have a gun, or hating me, or being afraid of me, and disconnecting, maybe you can connect with me with compassion, with empathy, and say, oh, Lorraine, this is about respect, isn't it? Yes. And this is where possibility opens up. Maybe together we can look at other ways that I can meet my need for respect that don't involve carrying a gun. There's infinite ways to get respect that don't involve that particular strategy. And this is my other challenge to you. When you leave this room, think about the whole world in terms of different strategies to meet needs. Because once you start looking at the world in this way, it can be radical. It can be life-changing, because think about it. This job that I have is just a strategy to meet certain needs. There are many other strategies. This marriage is a strategy to meet certain needs. You know, a lot of things that we hold in certain ways can be held much, not only more lightly, but with more choice. Can be held with more choice when I realize that that's a strategy that I'm choosing. I love doing training on accountability. This is a key to accountability, is to realize that none of us are victims. To some degree, we always make choices. We may not always ask for things that happen in our world, but we can always choose how we experience it. So we can have a whole workshop on just this alone to keep things moving and get you into the exercises. Any questions about this model and the importance of connecting at the level of needs?
The possibility part.
Yeah, okay. A little more on that?
Yeah. What I see is that you have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. So conflict.
You have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. How many of you have heard that? Yeah. I used to believe that.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, and storming, norming, forming, performing, right? You know, we've facilitated, 101. Since I've discovered NVC, that can be avoided. If we can intentionally connect at the level of needs, we can head conflict off at the pass. And there might be some impasses in terms of conflict. I mean, sometimes there are limited resources, limited time, limited money. Maybe there's not enough for everyone to get a slice of pie. Right? We have poverty in the world. We have, inequity in our workplaces. And yet, when we can connect at the level of needs, what often happens is, even if maybe not everyone can get a slice of pie, I might actually come to care about you enough that I'm willing to give you some of mine. So let me see if I can give you a specific organizational example. So I had a 6-month leadership program doing NVC training around collaborative communications for a big pharmaceutical company a few years ago. And 2 of the groups that we trained was the in-house IT department. And I forget what the other group, there's a travel group, there are several other groups, but for the IT group, they had like a service desk, an in-house help desk that was only open for certain hours. And it was getting in the way of other project responsibilities that they had. And so in the training, they actually learned to make a request, that's part of the art of NVC, to reduce the hours. And they had made the request before to senior management. And they said, no, because we need to have Well, once we actually had an NVC environment where they were able to communicate, well, why do we want fewer hours? It's not just a need for, relief, or it's not laziness, right? Or trying to get stuff off my plate and get someone else to handle it. It's really about a sense of responsibility to things that are even more important and that they're even more talented and able to do. You want to play to your strengths and what you're good at. And that person, once they established a connection with the level of needs of why that request was made, that senior manager actually approved kind of met them in the middle, slightly shortened it, if I recall correctly, but then used other sources of support. It might have been interns or other types of labor to fill in the gaps to some degree. So it's interesting, what I've noticed in doing this for years now is by establishing a connection, we create more creative possibilities because I actually care about you and I want to see us both win. I can understand why this is important to you. We've all experienced that. Think about it. Someone cuts me off in the freeway, how do you think I react? Right? And you've probably even seen people, get cut off and then get aggressive. I'm going to cut you off, and now we're road rage and getting dangerous, right? If we can connect at the level of needs, imagine how different it is if I know that that person who cut me off is pregnant on their way to the hospital for a delivery, right? Or has their elderly mother and they're trying to get to urgent care. If I understood deeper what was really going on, I'm not saying every driver is doing that. There are careless drivers out there. But if I connected with what's really going on with the other part, that goes to understanding the other party. Do you think I'm going to block you from cutting me off? I'll be like, no, I want to be generous. So what I've noticed in doing work with organizations with NVC is connecting at the level of needs opens up generosity. And that fuels creativity of solutions and more possibility. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So I get it.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Maybe a quick add-on to that. In the case of, it's easier to understand connecting to the needs of someone who's driving to the hospital for birth or something, but for the more subtle examples of someone who's just a careless driver, and you can extrapolate that to other workplace examples that are maybe a little less extreme. How would you connect to the need? And can you give some examples of those needs that seem a little less noble?
Yeah, more workplace related. Yeah.
Deeper, there's something to connect to still.
Yeah, a couple years ago I did a big conflict resolution with about 30 people at a very large utility. And there were two groups that, it got so bad. There were emails flying back and forth that, the crazy long ones where people are going off. Not just one. And it wasn't just between a few individuals. It was literally group to group. One group was an advanced technology group. They were doing some very cutting edge technology that was moving so fast, there weren't even regulations in place yet to make sure that this technology isn't going to blow anything up or create any sort of dangers, right? So there's this advanced technology group full of these technical hotshots who are creative, fast-moving, let's get stuff up and out. They have great, pretty exciting jobs. And then there was the compliance group that was assigned to work with them. And it's like, hold your horses. We can, at a minimum, get sued, at a maximum, get hurt. If we don't So can you imagine the conflict, the natural conflict? You are getting in the way. Your job is to say no to everything we do, compliance people. You don't appreciate what we're doing, right? And then the compliance people were like, Mustang Sally, you better slow your Mustang down, or else Papa's going to take away the keys. So is that the kind of example you're talking about?
Yeah, that would, and if somebody's seeming to do it out of just being in a terrible mood, for example, because there you can directly see okay, you're doing your job, I'm doing my job, but if it's like, hey, there's no reason to
be nasty,
just blocking what I'm trying to do or something.
Without revealing too much identity, there was nastiness in these groups. There was actually literally senior managers coming in and embarrassing the other senior manager in a meeting. There was not only online but in personal arguments, really you know, like I can hear you over the cubicle stuff. What?
That was a tough time for utilities, if I remember correctly, a couple of years ago.
It's always a tough
So
time.
that's right.
So we're going to take you through an exercise that's very similar to an exercise that I had them do in 6 hours. 6 hours. I mean, when I used to be a younger facilitator, we'd do about 3 days for this level of conflict. In 6 hours, we took them through an exercise that you'll be going through. And then I left a lot of space as a facilitator for regrets. They sat in a circle, and I said, now is your time. You know, remember I told you resentment, you know, how many of you have resentments, 5 years, 10 years? Okay, this is your one shot to make it right. Would anyone like to offer a regret? And I planted some seeds. I talked to the senior managers first and made sure they expressed their regrets to each other first. And then boom, trickle, 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 waterfall. By the end of that session, we actually had some in tears from the regrets they expressed, deep apologies, hugs, and, this is the part that I love, action commitments to do things differently. So what started off as, this is just being nasty, you're being a reckless driver, there's no reason to raise your voice, there's no reason to attack me and embarrass me in front of my people. I mean, this can get personal, right? Connecting at the level of needs, which is what they did, with empathy, appreciating the stress that both sides go through and the stress that they cause each other. Oh, I didn't realize how much that got on your nerves. I knew you didn't like it, but I didn't realize how much. I didn't realize how much that actually impacted your performance. Once you build that appreciation and that connection of what matters most to you at the level of needs, suddenly I'm willing to be a little softer. Maybe I could still be angry, but I might show it a little more gracefully. I might talk to you personally about it instead of gossip to the world about how awful you are. I might actually do it honorably. So, did that answer your question? Yeah. I hope people use this though as a way of operating versus as a way of resolving conflicts when everything goes wrong. That's my mission in life. I want health care, not emergency rooms. Right, so let's jump into some exercises. You ready? Okay. So we finish at 8. Is that correct? Okay. I'm just going to, for time's sake, we're just going to jump into the juiciest exercise right now. How about that?
Yeah.
And that's the exercise that I alluded to. Okay. Please pull out the cards from each of the decks. Have one person at each team volunteer to be the speaker.
Speaker.
Yep. And everybody think about your response to the following question. Are you ready? Are you ready? Here's the question. What is the most difficult impact? What is the most difficult impact of change that you are personally experiencing? Okay, this is not a role play. This is a real play. I want you to speak from your current experience working with organizational change. And I want you to think about the one thing that most impacts you in ways that you do not enjoy of the changes that are going on in your workplace that affect you. Is anyone lacking an example? Because I have a plan B for you if you are. Kind of? Okay, in that case, I would suggest either doing an anticipated change that you anticipate struggling with or a recent change. Would that work for you?
I think so.
Okay, cool. Okay. Do I need to write that down, or are you okay remembering that? I'll write it down as you begin the exercise. So, what is the most difficult impact of change that you're experiencing? So here's how the exercise goes. One person gets to be the speaker and holds the feelings deck, the deck of emotions. And that's, I believe, is that the red deck? The yellow. So the person who's going to be the first speaker, who's going to share their answer to that question, gets the yellow deck. Okay, as I speak, pick out like 2 or 3 feelings words that describe how you feel, the emotions. Don't show them to people yet. You're gonna, this is empathy poker, you guys. This is, you gotta do your poker face. So pick out 3 secret little feelings cards that describe the emotions that you experience around this change that you're gonna share. And the rest of you folks are listeners. Listeners, divide the red deck amongst yourselves so everyone has roughly the same amount of cards. That's your poker hand. Go ahead and do that right now. And can we have everyone at each table set a 1-minute timer? Set a 1-minute timer. Yeah.
What do we do with the red ones? Divide the full deck up?
The red ones are the needs, correct? Yeah. Divide them equally amongst everyone but the speaker. Yeah. So each of you might get about 10 to 14 cards.
3 that represent your feelings.
Maybe we don't start it yet.
Nope, not yet. Are you guys ready to start? Okay, so here's how we begin. Does everyone have a timer set for 1 minute? Get your timer set for 1 minute. And I'll explain it. I'll explain it how it goes all the way through. And can we use you as a model?
Sure.
Okay. So Amanda's the speaker, correct? Can you guys all, do you mind if we do 1 round with you just to model it?
Sure, I'll try. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys will have to speak a little loud for everyone to hear. Are you ready for your 1-minute timer? Okay, I'll just walk you through it. In a moment, Amanda's going to speak for 1 minute about the most difficult impact of change that she is personally experiencing. Okay, listeners, this is your job. So those of you holding your deck of red cards, this is your job. You want to listen free of judgment, free of, oh my God, I've got that. That's also true for me. So, it's all about her. It's not about you, right? Stay focused with compassionate curiosity about what your speaker is about to share. You want to be at the bottom of that iceberg. What are the needs that are alive for Amanda in what she's sharing? Remember, I'm telling you I'm carrying a gun. Is it about respect? I might be a micromanager. Is it about trust? What are the underlying needs that are important to Amanda as she shares her experience about change? And you've got some needs in your hand. Once she shares and that 1-minute timer goes off, each of you will pick 1 or 2 cards from your hand. That's your best guess of the needs that might most relate to what she just shared. And then once everyone's presented their needs cards, Amanda will get to pick the ones that actually most accurately reflect her experience. So let's walk you through this so you see how this works. Okay, are you ready, Amanda? 1 minute, go.
Okay, so my organization is going through a lot of change, and I am charged with starting up a new team soon. And I've only been in this job for a few months, and I've done this a few times. It hasn't been as I hoped in the past, so I'm wanting to make sure that I do this right in starting up a new team, and it's gonna kind of I want to bring out a connection with my new team members to each other, and I think that's going to really require me to dig into my to model vulnerability so that then they're also vulnerable to each other, and I want to make sure that I'm also really efficient with my time with them and starting up these new teams, and let's see, there's
You don't have to go for the whole minute if you don't want. Oh, okay. Yeah, you don't have to fill up the minute if you feel like you've completely described your situation. Give her a little compassion, you guys. Thank you, man. That's not, you got the hot seat on this one. Okay, so here's what comes next. Starting with someone to the speaker's right or left. Who will that be? Which of you will begin? We're going to go to around the circle. So we'll start with Shani?
Shani.
Oh, Shani. And this is how it works. You pick your 1 or 2 cards, that's your best guess of the needs that were relevant from what you just heard. And you put the cards down this way. You will say, are you wanting more? Bam. Or are you wanting more? Bam. Card on the table. And the speaker, poker face, listen to Lady Gaga, you do not reveal the answer until everyone's put their guess on the table. Okay, so go ahead and Shani, model that for us.
Are you wanting connection?
And then the next one? Or let's just do one. Is that okay? Just for the sake. Okay. Next, Craig.
Are you wanting more to matter and belong?
Connection, to matter and belong.
Do you want help and support or clarity?
Do you want more acceptance?
Okay, now Amanda gets to break her poker face and pick the maybe 1 to 2 cards that most resonate with what you just shared.
I'd probably go with help and support.
Okay.
That definitely, that's really.
Great. Okay, do you see how this works? And take a moment, before you move on to the next speaker, just take a moment and let it soak in. Oh, I'm sorry. Ah! I skipped a step. Thank you.
Yeah, no.
Oh my gosh.
What is the feelings part?
Before at the end of her sharing, she's supposed to put down her 3 feelings cards.
Oh, okay.
So when the 1-minute timer goes off, you can say, I felt or feel. What were your feelings? Thank you.
Optimistic, nervous, vulnerable, afraid.
Thank you. So before you guys do your guesses, make sure they put their feeling cards down, and then you do your guesses. Thank you. Okay. Any questions about how this works? Okay. We may not get to everyone sharing, but we'll try. So try to minimize the talk after you've gone, and just go straight to the next person. Okay. Jump in. Hey folks, just a quick, I want to make it a little easier for you. It might make it even more connecting, is if you put down a needs card, you can say a few words, just a few, that connects it with the story. So instead of just saying, are you wanting more appreciation? You could say, oh, were you wanting more appreciation from your boss when, he said this and good job to you, but really didn't tell you what he really meant? So you can use a few words to connect it to the story to make it more meaningful. So feel free to do that. And thank you, Amanda, for that reminder. All right, let's debrief this. Okay, raise your hand if you felt truly understood by the people who listened to you tonight. And it's okay to be honest if you didn't. Who would like to speak? What was it? I want to hear from a few people. What was it like for you to either be heard at the level of needs or to listen at the level of needs? How was that experience different from the way you normally have meetings? Anyone?
It was like everything I wanted my supervisor to say for the last 12 months.
Ah! Everything you wanted your supervisor to say. I love it. Okay, who else? How is this different from your normal meetings?
Well, as a listener, I was more attentive because I had only a limited number of things to say rather than thinking the whole time, what am I going to say, what am I going to respond, what am I going to... So
yeah.
At the end, can pull different things like, oh, this and this.
That's why a lot of people regard MVC as a mindfulness practice. Mm-hmm. Meditators, take note. You really have to be fully in the present for this to work. I can't be thinking, what am I going to say? Because I am so completely present with you. And believe it or not, by doing that, efficiency can actually increase. Merck did a study on their MVC-based training, and depending on which department took the training, they reduced their meeting time, the time it took for them to get to a decision in meeting by, I can't remember, it was like something from like 40 to 60%, depending on the group. Can you imagine that this quality of presence can actually speed up your meetings? Sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, or go deep to go fast. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left, and I know you probably want some resources. some people said, how do I use these cards? I want you to take those lists, those handouts home, and you can use the list as a substitute for the cards if you don't want to spend any money. I want to make sure you can do this all with what you have today. And the way you do this exercise with these is you can have people write on an index card something from the list, or you can photocopy the list and have them circle the needs. So that's one way to use it alternatively with the list. If you would like to purchase those cards, you can get them on Amazon.com. You can get them at the NVC. If you do Grok cards, Grok, that's the name. I think there's a website called groktheworld.org or .com, and you can buy them directly from there. Let's see. There's actually going to be, later this year, a version of these cards out specifically for organizations. I know because I'm the one writing them. And I'm currently in collaboration with the two women who designed this deck. We're going to publish it under their brand, but it's going to be specific words for organizations. Words like transparency, words like security, some things that don't show up in this deck. The older of these decks had words like sexual expression and stuff. Like, you don't want to see those in the workplace, right? Like need for affection. Even though it might be relevant. So if there's two ways, for those of you who are interested in the organizational version that's yet to be released, there's two ways to do that. One is, if you really want to be a part of this, next month there's a conference in Oxnard. That's the big California NVC conference. It's only $50 or $60. It includes lunch, and it's 2 full days of training. The reason it's so inexpensive is that a very large nonprofit, Child Development Resources, that serves preschoolers, in all of Ventura County, I think Head Start or Early Start, that they subsidize most of the cost of this conference. And they pay for trainers like me and many others who are well known in the NVC community to train on all kinds of different subjects. We're going to beta test the new deck at that conference and give you some exercises. Here's an exercise for new leaders in transition. Here's an exercise for continuous improvement, etc. So if you want to be part of that beta test group, come to the conference. It'll be fun. March, thank you. And thank you. April 18th and 19th. Another way to find out is you can get on my mailing list for Working Harmony. I try to send out an email about once a month. Lately they've been longer than once a month, but I will definitely give you a link to the conference, and I will also send you an email release when the cards are available. I also like to send videos. I do little 3-minute instructional videos on effective leadership skills, especially communication skills that are based in NVC. That's also part of my social change mission, is getting people training that they might not otherwise afford or have the time or resources for. So if you want to get on that list, or if you want to offer a testimonial, I'd be grateful too. LinkedIn's another way. And let's see, it is officially 8 o'clock, so I'm going to stick around if anyone would like to share any further, their comments, feedback, anything that you can teach me on how this might be more relevant to an Agile context. This is my first time out of the chutes with Agile, so I'm trusting there's probably even more that I can learn. And is there an evaluation?
Yeah, so there's this little sheet here that we would love your feedback, and we'll share this with Lorraine.
Thank you. And
little sheets on there. Give us to us on the way out. Where do you want us to put them when we're done? We just put it on the table on the way out, right there. Yeah, one of the ways that I see like acknowledgement of needs or understanding of needs is another way is through understanding customers and customer empathy. And so I would love to figure out how to apply this to developing more customer understanding and empathy. That's my little personal
absolutely.
But thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, everyone. And I have plenty more exercises for you, so if you'd like to have me back another time, I'd be more than happy to. So, yeah. And we can go even deeper into how this contributes to transparency and overcoming resistance to change. This is one step of what many steps you can do to change your culture, basically, to make it more open and less resistant. So, All right, much success to you all.
Thank you.